All right, thank you, Lori. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today for the 2023, oh my goodness, presentation for travel reporters. If you have any questions as we go throughout the presentation, please feel free to use that Q&A pod like Lori mentioned just a moment ago. As a disclaimer, the contents of this presentation are intended to provide clarity regarding the existing requirements of the FTA and NTD. Please always feel free to refer to the statutes and regulations for requirements. The goal of the webinar is to identify changes for the upcoming report year and to provide an overview of NTD reporting requirements and how to apply those requirements to the system. Again, this course is designed for travel transit agencies. Here's the agenda for the afternoon. First, we're going to do a quick overview of the NTD. Then we'll move on to important changes and clarifications for the 2023 report year, which will be a good amount more than last year. And then next, we're going to review the fundamentals of NTD reporting. We're going to discuss how to get started in the NTD reporting system, and then move on to how to kick off and complete the annual report. And then lastly, we're going to review how to validate and submit that report. So start to finish, we're going to help you out. Here's the contact information for the National Transit Database. If at any point you do require technical assistance while completing your report or accessing your published data products, please feel free to email the help desk supports found here. Again, my name is Bailey Kraus. You might have seen me before, and I am joined by Parker Collins, who will also be presenting in a little bit. Our contact information is listed here if you have any questions about this presentation or if you need to be put in touch with your analyst. In addition to our contact information, we also wanted to provide FTA program contacts here, Chelsea Champlin and Thomas Coleman. The key reference documents are located mostly here in one link, handy dandy link. This will include the policy manual, the Uniform System Accounts or USOA, the glossary, and the user guide. The reduced reporting policy manual is your friend and will be referenced throughout the presentation. First, a quick overview of the NTD. What is the National Transit Database? NTD was established to be the nation's primary source for information and statistics on all public transportation modes within the U.S. It's a source of data for performance measurement benchmarking as well as research in the transit space. So recipients and subrecipients of Chapter 53 funds are required to report to the NTD. Reporters may include those that have received funding in the past and are still required to report based on a continuing grant requirement, or those that wish to receive it in the future and will report voluntarily until they do. So why do you report? Well, as stated here, 5311 subrecipients and recipients are required to report due to grant requirements as mentioned here from state legislation, so 5335. I touched on this earlier, but data from the NTD is used for several things. So some examples include performance benchmarking, research and statistics programs, formula apportionments of funding, and reports for Congress, as seen here. The reporting deadlines for your report are October 31st, January 31st, and April 30th, and this will depend on your agency's fiscal year end date. These deadlines are monitored closely, and if you do have any questions on when to report, please reach out to your analyst. Again, this will be based on your agency, the transit agency's fiscal year end date that may or may not be the same as your state's fiscal year end date or your tribal fiscal year end date. So just make sure that one's correct. Now we're going to go into the changes and clarifications for report year 2023 that may affect your report. First, we'll have the WE20 weekly reference reporting forms. The background on this is a sample of reporters were selected to submit monthly submissions of data that represents a pre-selected week of service. This requirement only applies to those selected agencies. So if your agency was not selected and you're looking at me saying, Bailey, what is this? You may just go ahead and disregard this state or this requirement, but we did want to provide a little bit of information in case you do see this in the future. So again, the agencies selected for the sample have already been notified by their analysts and have submitted data. The reference weeks are here for the remainder of the 2023 calendar and can be seen on this slide. Again, if you haven't heard about it, you're probably okay. The next change for report year 2023 is the general feed specification, or GTFS, for fixed route modes. Tribal agencies who operate fixed route modes will be asked to submit GTFS links in report year 2023. All right. The GTFS links submitted to the NTD must be static and must not include any password protection. In other words, the link should be publicly accessible. After the initial submission of the GTFS links in your report year 2023, you'll just be asked to certify the links are up to date year to year. If there are any changes to the fixed route service, the GTFS links should be updated accordingly. GTFS links should be uploaded via the new P50 form, P as in profile 50 form, which will be found in the Related Actions tab of the agency's profile page. Again, static link for fixed route modes. We're not talking about demand response. We're talking about the bus, commuter bus, anything else that you may have that has a fixed route. All GTFS links submitted to the NTD must contain the agency, stops, routes, trips, stop times, and calendar or calendar date text files. Feed info and shape files are optional, but recommended. Please ensure that all links are public and accessible. Once again, no password protection. All right. The Rural Transportation Assistance Program, or RTAP, is a great resource for assistance with creating these GTFS feeds and links. We have included a link to their GTFS builder seen here on the slide. RTAP will also offer live support for GTFS on Thursdays between 1 and 1:30 p.m. Eastern. All right. The next form is called the B15 form. The B15 is also new for 2023. You may remember the B10 and the B30 if applicable. So the B15 will capture geospatial data for any demand response modes operated. If your agency operates multiple demand response modes, such as a purchase transportation demand response, as well as a directly operated demand response, you'll be asked to complete a B15 for each. Parker will be providing more detail on the B15 form in the annual report section of this presentation. It's 10 questions that you can go through. All right. The next form is the SNS 60 form. So SNS stands for Safety and Security, which is also a new form for report year 2023. The form will replace the current safety section that you may have seen on the RR20. The SNS 60 form will capture more detailed data related to safety and security events. Just like the B15 form, Parker's going to be providing more detail on it in a little bit once we start going through the forms. All right, the next thing, not a new form, thankfully. Starting in report year 2023, agencies will be asked to include the fuel types for the revenue vehicles on the existing A30 form. Once reported, this data will carry over from year to year, just like the other revenue vehicle data does. So you'll enter it once, it'll be there next year. All right. Next is you'll also need to include an emergency contact on your P10 form. This will be a person. The emergency contact does not need to be an existing NTD user and should just be a specific individual. FTA will use the emergency contact's information to establish contact with the agency in the event of an emergency situation. Once the emergency contact's information has been entered, agencies will recertify or update that information in each consecutive report year. So again, just one time, confirm it going forward. Next, we're going to jump into a review of NTD fundamentals. And this is where we're going to cover modes, types of service, revenue definitions, and an overview of financial information. Here on the slide are the most common modes for rural reporters: demand response and bus. Bus is a service powered by a motor and fuel contained within a vehicle. It includes those that have route deviation, point deviation, or deviated fixed route. Demand response service is defined as service scheduled in response to calls from passengers, like a dial-a-ride. Another popular mode in the rural module is the commuter bus mode. We do receive questions on this still on what is considered commuter bus service versus regular bus service. So to clarify, commuter bus operates with more than 5 miles of closed-door service, and the same type of vehicles are consistently operated on the service. If you think you have both bus and commuter bus service, please keep in mind that the vehicles should not be used between the services on the same day. And this also applies to the driver's work assignments, which are typically separate. If you are currently reporting both commuter bus, and you believe you may only need to report one mode, please contact your analyst for assistance, and we can help determine how it should be reported and provide steps on how to change this in the reporting system if appropriate. The next topic we're going to cover are types of service. So currently in the NTD, there are two main types of service: directly operated and purchased transportation. Directly operated is when the service is operated by the agency and uses the agency's employees. Purchased transportation is when the vehicles are operated by the seller's employees. The service is branded as the buyer's, and the buyer is paying the full cost of the service. Within the purchased transportation, there is TX for services that are operated by a taxi provider, and TN for services that are operated by a transportation network company, or TNC. If the service is operated by a contractor that is neither a taxi provider nor a TNC, the type of service would remain PT, or purchased transportation. So if you do have any questions about how that is differentiated, please let us know, or please let your analyst know. We're happy to go into more detail. All right, some of the common acronyms that you'll see and we'll be covering throughout this entire presentation going forward are these data collection items. So here are some of the data points, like I said, that you'll be hearing for a bit now. These data points are collected on a per mode and type of service basis, except for sponsored unlinked passenger trips, which are only collected by the demand response mode. So when we're talking about modes, we're talking about demand response, we're talking about bus, we're talking about commuter bus. When we're talking about types of service, that's when we're talking about the purchased transportation, directly operated, taxi, or TNC. All right, so what is revenue service? So we'll talk about a lot about revenue service going forward, which is when the vehicles are transporting passengers or are able to transport passengers. This does include the layover and recovery time. Revenue service does not include, however, deadhead, driver training, school bus, or charter services, as well as vehicle maintenance. So when you're looking at your miles and your hours and what you're going to report, make sure that it includes the revenue service and it does not include deadhead training and all those others. So what is deadhead? As mentioned on the previous slide, deadhead is not reported in your revenue service. So this includes leaving or returning to the garage or yard facility, changing routes, or when there is no expectation of carrying passengers. There are detailed tables found within the NTD policy manual, which provide further examples of what is and is not considered revenue service. And we're going to review a couple of these in a moment. And I did also want to mention about meal delivery services. If meal delivery does not include the active transport of passengers, this service is not reportable. Basically, we're looking for the ability to transport passengers. No passengers, data is probably not reportable. If you're using that 5311 funding for the meal delivery, the funding would be reported. However, the amount spent on the meal delivery service would not be reported under the mode's expenses. And when Parker goes over it later, he's going to show you an RR20 form and how they're supposed to match from the top totals and the bottom totals. If you have something like this, where you have meal delivery services paid with the 5311 funding, you wouldn't include it in your funding sources, but you would include the cost. This would mean that you'd have a mismatch. So you would be talking to your analyst about this. All right. I also wanted to go over the basics of public transportation service. So public transportation is open to the general public, which includes the branding, program brochures, and the website to show prominently how to ride the service and the details of it. Another factor is that it is shared ride, as mentioned in the slide. So two or more people can be on the same vehicle and you're trying to group passengers. All right, as I mentioned earlier, here are the examples of the demand response mode and what is and is not considered revenue service. Please note that the time and miles from when the vehicle is dispatched from the garage to the first pickup are not revenue service until you reach that pickup point. On the end of the example, the time and miles from the last drop-off back to the dispatching point is also not considered revenue service. There is no expectation of carrying any passengers during those points. Following up on the previous slide, this is a rundown of what is and is not considered revenue service for the bus modes. Again, from the garage to the first stop of the route is not considered revenue service, and from the last drop-off point back to the garage is not revenue service. Both of these tables are found in the policy manual for reference. I would definitely take a look at them, print them out. If you have any questions about it, let us know. So unlinked passenger trips and sponsored UPT. These numbers should represent the number of passengers boarding during the reporting period and are counted each time they board the vehicle, no matter how many vehicles they use from their origin to their destination. When reporting UPT on the RR20 form, which Parker will go over in a little bit, this should be the total number of passenger trips, both regular and sponsored. So I wanted to point out sponsored trips. Sponsored trips are those that are paid in part or in full by a third party. These may be part of a coordinated human services transportation plan. Common sponsors are the VA, Medicare, and assisted living centers. So again, sponsored UPT should be a subset of the total unlinked passenger trips for all the demand response modes. So sponsored UPT should always be smaller than or equal to total UPT. All right, vehicles operating annual maximum service, or VOMS, are the number of revenue vehicles an agency operates to meet the annual maximum service requirement. VOMS are counted during the peak season of the year on the busiest day, but you're going to want to exclude any atypical days or special events. So this is not the number of active vehicles you have or the highest number of vehicles available, but rather the maximum amount used at the same time to provide that service on like one day. So we're not asking for all 10. How many of those 10 did you have running at one time at your busiest time? Great. Accounting requirements. Now switching into fun stuff, fun other numbers. Another important definition is accrual accounting. NTD reporting requirements for financial data follow the generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP, in accrual accounting. If there are conflicts between GAAP and NTD reporting instructions and requirements, NTD rules are to be followed. In accrual accounting, the revenue is recorded when earned, regardless of when the payment is received, and expenses are recorded when the liability occurs, regardless of when the payment is made. So please see the example here and in the policy manual for more detail on when to report. Next, we're going to review the types of expenses. First are operating expenses, which are the day-to-day expenses that a transit agency incurs. These may be for operating and maintaining vehicles, maintaining other equipment, planning costs, admin costs, as well as the examples seen here. Capital assistance spent on operations is when capital funding is spent on activities that are normally considered operating, such as preventative maintenance and the purchase of tires. Please make sure to break this out of your other operating funding, as this has a different match percentage. There is a separate field for this on the RR20 forms for certain funding sources like 5311, 53, and 5310, as seen in that slide. All right, capital expenses are those that are related to the purchase of equipment. It's capital item. Equipment means an article of non-expendable personal property having a useful life of more than 1 year. The equipment will have an acquisition cost, which equals the lesser the capitalization level established by the government unit, as in yourselves, or $5,000 as determined by FTA. You may see this issue pop up in validation from your analyst saying that you only have $2,000 worth of capital cost to confirm that that's what your capitalization level is. So you may see this. All right. Let's see here. For operating expenses, if your agency has more than one mode, the operating costs will be broken out between the modes based on the direct and shared expenses, or indirect. Once the direct expenses for each mode are identified and broken out, the remaining shared expenses may be calculated between the modes based on a cost allocation method. Please note that this is only acceptable for shared expenses that are not tied to a specific mode, as there should be some expenses that are direct to each mode. If you have any issues with figuring out what's a direct and a shared expense, your analyst will be more than happy to help. When reporting data to the NTD, you will report the funding you spent, not the amount your agency was awarded. Here on the slide is an example. If your agency was awarded $275,000, but you only spent $178,000, you would report the $178,000 instead of the $275,000 that was reported, because that was what you spent during that fiscal year, regardless of whatever you were awarded. You may use that money in the future. Great. Lastly, before we wrap this up and switch over to the NTD interface, I wanted to mention capital responsibility, because we will reference it a couple times later on with regards to the transit asset management program forms. Let's see here. Please see the list here to determine whether or not your agency has direct capital responsibility for an asset. As a note, for the third bullet, an infrastructure asset itemized as a capital line item in the budget does not necessarily mean that your agency has direct capital responsibility. Your agency must also have management or oversight responsibilities for that line item project. In addition, performing minimal preventative maintenance work doesn't necessarily indicate direct capital responsibility. I know it's a lot, but just let us know if you have questions on that. Again, happy to help. All right, moving on to interface management. The NTD homepage is found here. This is where the data products, policy manuals, and a clickable link to go to the reporting system, among other items, is housed. Logging into the NTD, if you are an external user, you will click this link to log in. From there, it will prompt you to log in to login.gov. Please make sure to set this up with the same email address for your NTD reporting. If you have issues with NTD, or I'm sorry, with login.gov, you have to contact their help desk. We do not have any access to it ourselves on our end, but we can confirm that your email is the same. In addition to the password you set with login.gov, you'll need to set up at least one secondary authentication method option as seen here. After logging in, getting through login.gov, all users will land on this home page. Here you'll select NTD in order to access your report. If you'd automatically like to go to the NTD every time you log in, you can click on the star at the top right-hand corner of the NTD box, and this will save that future preference. The NTD homepage allows users to directly access your report from the front page, so less clicking. Next from home over is the task tab. This section houses your important tasks, such as the report year kickoff, any incomplete forms, or incomplete submissions. So if you call up your analyst saying, hey, I think I submitted your report, and we're saying, no, I don't see it, there's a good chance it might be in that task tab. So you might want to check that out, make sure that's blank. You can keep on moving on. Great. To access your annual or your report packages, you want to ensure that you are on the home page. From there, you can select the annual tab, as it will populate any open NTD reports for your agency. You can access the form one of two ways. You can either click on the NTD ID with the folder icon on the left, which will direct you to the report package summary page, which will also allow you to access the related actions for the package, such as submission. If you'd like to just edit the forms, you want to get in and out, you can click on that pencil icon on the right-hand side of the page, and the system will take you directly to the clickable list of forms to edit. To access the reporter profiles, so say you want to look at something from last year, or just your profiles, update that P50, you still want to be on that home page, but instead of clicking on annual, you'll click on profile, P for profile, and your agency's profile will load. The profiles where you're going to be able to edit your mode, your agency basic information, as well as view other users from your agency. To view the individual forms, you can click on the pencil icon on the right-hand side of the page, which will allow you to access those profile forms. And to access the other profile options, you're going to click on the NTD folder icon on the left. So think of it this way: folder icon is a summary, the pencil is direct to action. Great. Once you click on the NTD ID folder, for example, on the left, you're going to see the profile summary page as you have in previous years. Here you can go through the related actions and edit those P forms. Great. The form library is where you can see data from previous years that has been submitted to the NTD. You can use the drop-down to select the package and then the link in blue to form whichever one you want at that point, and just download them as ad hoc. In addition to viewing the forms under Related Actions tab of the profile, you can also print the previous year's report packages in full rather than form by form. Other actions you complete here is viewing, editing the profile form. So P10 is your basic information, P20 is your modes. Do not add an end date to your mode unless you have stopped. Please do not. And if you do, you may see some weird forms not populate. So make sure you're not ending your mode unless you actually need to. From here, you can also view that P30 and update that P50. If you do choose that print the annual package, you'll be taken to a new page where you can click on the refresh button until the link comes up for you to download. Once it is downloaded, you're going to be sent back to the page with all the forms on it, and that little view printable version of the form will be there. That's what you're going to click on to download that. HTML format version of the prior year's form is kind of hidden in there, so we wanted to make sure we called that out. All right, here we're going to cover users and user management. To access the system, you first need to be a user. To add users, each agency must have a user manager. A user manager may edit and add other users to your agency, and your user manager or UM may also fill NTD roles such as CEO and NTD contact. If you do need to update your user manager, just feel free to email your analyst and they can assist you with updating the user manager so that person can update additional users. The most important users to have on your account will be the CEO, besides the user manager, that is, will be the CEO and the NTD contact. The CEO will be the director or the CEO of the agency and will be the one submitting the original submission of the report. Without a CEO, cannot submit. And the NTD contact will be the main point of contact for the analyst to reach out to if there is one after the CEO. After the first submission, the NTD contact can submit any subsequent revisions the report may need. Agencies may have an unlimited number of editors and viewers. However, there can only be one CEO or NTD contact. If you're already a user in the system and you need to unlock your account, after 60 days without logging in, you get locked out, basically. Not that you didn't do anything wrong, just you get locked out. There are two different ways to complete the unlock process. You can either unlock your own account if you've set up security questions, which we'll go over in a moment, or you can submit an unlock request. If you do submit an unlock request, the request will go to the user managers on profile, and if you are the user manager, it will go to another user manager if you have one, or the NTD team for processing. It is important to note that even if you are locked out, you can still log into the NTD system. However, you just won't see the forms. You won't see any actionable items. So if you're logging in, you're like, hey, Bailey, I don't see a single thing. We're going to make sure that you're unlocked and we can move forward. As mentioned, if you set up your security questions beforehand, you can unlock yourself by answering them. To set up your questions, you're going to go to the top right-hand corner of the screen. There's like a little hamburger icon at the top. After logging in, you can select your profile and then select related actions, then manage security questions. From there, you can go ahead and follow those steps to set them up. Right. So now we're going to jump in the first step of reporting, the report year kickoff. The report year kickoff is there for agencies to set up reporting packages for the year that they are reporting in, so 2023. Start the CEO, CEO delegate, and the NTD contact will have access to this task after the fiscal year has ended. That user will select the task from the task menu, then accept and proceed. If one person accepts it and has it in their queue, it goes only to their task list. The other users will not be able to see it. So if you start the kickoff, please finish the kickoff. The next step of the kickoff is to verify the users. You review this information here and then ask your user manager to update what is necessary after kickoff is completed, or you can review it and do it yourself and after you complete the kickoff. After After clicking continue on the previous page, you are going to confirm your modes. This will either be the ones that you have reported on in the past, or if you need to, you can add new modes at this time. Again, as I mentioned in the previous couple slides ago, do not enter an end date to the mode if the mode has not stopped operating. All right, the next step is managing your transit asset management sponsor. If you have a sponsor, you will select them. If you don't have a sponsor, you'll just click on continue and leave the sponsor area blank. If you did not have, if you did not select a sponsor last year, this will be where you can select one. Again, if you don't have a sponsor and you complete your own plan, you can just click on continue. The next kickoff step is to confirm your reporter type for the current year. This should be pre-filled as seen here. And you can click on continue to go to the next step. It's just confirming that you are a small system reporter. Nope, you haven't gone over it. It's a little bit blurrier, I apologize. And then again, this is to confirm next year's reporting type, so RY 2024 in this, for example, and then it shouldn't change again. You can click on submit to complete the kickoff process. The last step is clicking continue and then OK. So you do have to click this OK. And then after you click that OK, you'll be notified that the report year kickoff is being completed and your forms are generating. This could take some time as the packages are populating one by one, so please do be patient. Sometimes it can take about 3 to 5 minutes. I feel like it's usually within 2, but as the packages and the reports are being populated based on the information that you're given and specific to your agency, it can take some time to generate. All right. After your kickoff is completed and your forms have generated, you'll need to go into those packages to start filling out the data. So we're going to jump into how to access your forms and what forms you're going to see. From the home page, you will select your agency's fiscal year 2023 report. So again, you can click on the folder or you can click on the pencil. I clicked on the folder in my example. So here you're going to land on the summary page. If you click on the folder, you're going to see related actions at the top, the annual forms, and the view issue buttons. You can also submit from this page as well in the future if you did want to do that. To access the editable forms, you're going to click on annual forms. From there, the page is going to reload and the form names will appear for blue for you to click on or for you to click on. These are the general forms that a tribal agency will report on, of which Parker will be going over in a moment. They are separated into types of forms. So the basic information will be the B forms. The asset information will start with A, and then the reduced reporting form, which holds the service and financial data, is called the RR20, and the new safety data SNS60 form. The last 2 forms are going to just be summary forms and a certification form, which usually don't take long. I'm now going to go ahead and turn it over to Parker to go over what each form contains and details how to fill it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. My name is Parker Collins, and I will be taking us through how to complete the 2023 annual report. And the first form we will discuss is the basic information B10 form. The first section in the form is general information. Please ensure that your organization type is selected as option 13, tribe. Please also answer whether your agency receives or benefits from Chapter 5307, Urbanized Area Formula Program funds. This will typically be no, but please contact your analyst for further discussion if you think you should select yes for your agency. The next section is the demographic information. Check to make sure that your primary UZA is correctly listed, which is the primary state in which your service runs. Be sure to add any applicable secondary UZAs in case your agency operates in more than one state, or if it also serves an urbanized area. If the secondary UZA field does not apply to your agency, please disregard it. Next is the tribal demographic information section. If you completed an NTD report last year, this section will automatically populate with the tribal area you selected last year. Please check to make sure this is correct or add any additional tribal areas your agency serves. If this is your first year completing a report, select Add Tribal Area and begin typing your tribal area, and the system will auto-populate options for you to select. If you are unable to locate your tribal area, please contact your analyst. The auxiliary sections on the B10 form typically do not apply to most tribes. Do not select modes filing a separate NTD report unless you are paying for a separate transit service that is not included in your report. And do not select separate assets unless another agency reports your agency's assets in their NTD report. If you have any questions regarding these sections, please contact your analyst for discussion. Next, we will discuss the new geographic area coverage B15 form. As a reminder, this form will only appear in your report if you operate a demand response or DR mode. For each demand response mode and type of service combination, you will respond to 10 questions in this form. The questions will be dynamic based on your selections to previous questions. We will review each of the 10 questions through screenshots of the report form. Question 1 asks, if you serve residents in another state besides your state, select yes or no. Question 2 allows you to select the counties that your agency serves, either in whole or in part. You should start by selecting add, after which you can choose your state and report the counties. Question 3 allows you to select the census places that are served in these counties. You can then select the service level by indicating whether the census places are wholly served or partially served. Question 4 asks if any portion of your demand response service is intended to meet the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA complementary fair transit requirements for a fixed route mode, select yes or no. If you select yes, question 5 asks if your service area is limited to your own NTD ID. If it is, select yes. If the ADA service serves another NTD reporter, select no. If you select no, you should search for and select all other NTD IDs that your ADA service covers. Question 6 asks, if you have different passenger eligibility requirements or different terms and conditions of service, select yes or no. Question 7 asks, which days per week you operate, for which you should select the applicable checkboxes. When you're done, select create days of the week on the right-hand side of this page, which will populate question 8. For question 8, you will report the service begin and end time for each day. You will also answer basic questions about these services as seen in the column headers under question 8 shown in the screenshot. If you have any questions about these specific terms, please reach out to your NTD validation analyst. Question 9 asks for the minimum advance reservation time for your service. Enter the numeric minimum and indicate whether that number corresponds to days or hours. Finally, question 10 asks for the fare charged for this service. You should not include donations in this field. We do understand that this is a new form, so again, we encourage you to contact your analyst if you have any questions about the reporting requirements. The next form we will discuss is the contractual relationship form B30. The B30 form captures information for purchase transportation contracts with other agencies. It identifies logistical specifics of the contract as well as some basic financial information regarding the contract details. The NTD has specific requirements for what constitutes purchase transportation. The buyer of the service should report this information if it meets the following criteria. One is that the buyer must pay 100% of the full cost to provide the service. Another is that the service must be operated in the name of the buyer, meaning the service must be branded as the entity paying for the service. The seller must also operate and manage the service on the buyer's behalf. The full list of purchase transportation criteria is provided in the NTD Reduced Reporter Policy Manual, which can be found on the NTD program website. If you completed a B30 form in last year's report, this form will automatically populate in this year's report. If you need to add a new contractual relationship form, the first step in this process is selecting whether the agreement is with another agency who reports to the NTD or a private company. Select Continue after making your selection. If you select NTD Reporter, you must identify the contracted agency from a list generated from the NTD database. Complete the contract summary section on the right side of the page. The required fields are contractual position, type of contract, primary feature, service captured, and fares retained by. There's also an options section for you to report whether the buyer of the service provides any public assets to the seller, such as vehicles or maintenance facilities. If you're unsure how to complete any of these fields, please refer to the NTD policy manual or contact your analyst. The next section refers to this agreement's key financial and operation statistics. Begin by selecting the Add New Mode and Type of Service button. Add the appropriate mode or modes for the contracted service. Complete the financial and operating data fields as shown here. Again, if you have any questions, please refer to the policy manual or contact your validation analyst. Once you've completed this form, select Save and Validate. If the contract has been terminated, you can remove the B30 form from your report package by selecting the Remove Contractual Relationship button at the bottom of your report package summary page. Some tribes have relationships with a local transit provider in which the tribe contributes an annual subsidy amount in exchange for the provider extending its service into the tribal area. In this case, the tribe does not cover the full cost of service, and it does not operate or purchase other modes. If this situation applies, you should select the subsidized option under contract type on the B30 form. For example, let's say a tribe pays a local transit provider a fixed amount of funds per year to operate a bus route extension. The provider adds multiple stops along one route to service the tribal area, and the buses are branded as and managed by the provider. In this case, the tribe is not covering the full cost of service and will report this agreement as a subsidy. Next, we will discuss the Stations and Maintenance Facilities A10 form. The A10 form represents your agency's passenger stations and maintenance facilities. For fixed route modes, such as motor bus, a section for passenger stations will appear at the top of the form. Report the total number of ADA accessible and ADA non-accessible stations, as well as the total number of escalators and elevators if applicable. Please note that passenger stations must be significant structures in a separate right-of-way and typically include ticketing, restrooms, concessions, or an information desk. Bus stops or simple bus shelters do not constitute as passenger stations. In the next section, report the type and number of maintenance facilities your agency utilizes for public transit service, based on the vehicle capacity and ownership type for those maintenance facilities. The definition of a maintenance facility is a garage or building where mechanics perform routine maintenance and repairs, and typically serves as operating garages. You should not include bus barns in this count, nor should you include any third-party facility where you would bring your vehicle for work, such as a Jiffy Lube. If one maintenance facility is shared by two or more modes, you should report a prorated share between the respective modes A10 form. This could be based on any data point that indicates how much of the facility is used per mode, but one of the most common approaches is to prorate the facility based on the number of vehicles it serves. For example, let's say an agency owns one facility and operates a fixed route bus and demand response service. The maintenance facility serves vehicles for both modes, and the agency owns 10 vehicles total. The fixed route bus mode runs 4 vehicles, and the demand response mode runs 6 vehicles. In this example, we would expect to see 0.4 reported in the bus A10 form and 0.6 reported in the demand response form. Please ensure that the total number of facilities reported between all A10 forms equals a whole number. Next is the facilities inventory A15 form. The A15 form collects basic information on facilities that your agency uses to supply public transit service. On this form, you should report administrative and maintenance facilities for which your agency has capital responsibility. However, you should report all passenger and parking facilities that your agency uses in public transit service, regardless of who has capital responsibility for those facilities. Some common examples of facility types are administrative buildings, combined administration and maintenance facilities, and standard maintenance facilities. Please note that if your agency reports a maintenance facility as owned on the A10 form, we would generally expect that the facility to appear on the A15 form, as long as your agency's use for that facility is greater than incidental. If you reported facilities in last year's NTD report, those facilities will automatically pre-populate in this year's form. This means that you will only need to add new facilities or update existing facilities on an as-needed basis. To add a new facility to this form, select Add New, followed by Add Facility. This will allow you to begin entering data for the facility. There are 3 sections for you to complete when adding a new facility: facility information, condition assessment, and address. If you're unsure of how to complete any of these data entry fields, please refer to the NTD policy manual or contact your analyst. Select the No Data to Report checkbox if your agency does not have any reportable facilities. Next, we will review the Revenue Vehicle Inventory A30 form. If you completed this form last year, your data from report year 2022 will pre-populate, which again means you will only need to add new fleets or edit existing fleets as needed. You can enter new fleets by selecting Add New Fleet button, or you can edit an existing fleet by selecting the RVID link for that fleet towards the left of the table. When adding a new fleet, the first section you will see is basic information. You should complete all required fields for this fleet. The next section is vehicle information. Again, complete all required fields in this section. Please note that a new field type will be required starting report year 2023. You should select your fleet's fuel type from a drop-down menu. Please complete this field for all new and existing fleets this report year. Transit agencies must report the number of active vehicles in each fleet as of the end of their fiscal year. Total vehicles represent how many vehicles there are in the fleet you are reporting. Active vehicles indicates a number of vehicles that provide regular service and include spare vehicles, whereas inactive vehicles may include any of the following: vehicles that are awaiting sale or disposal, vehicles that are in storage or are in part of a FTA-approved emergency contingency plan, or vehicles that are out for major repairs. As a quick reporting reminder, please remember to mark fleets as retired in the reporting system if the vehicles have been sold or disposed of, rather than deleting the fleets. To retire a fleet, update the number of active vehicles to 0, after which you will see the question, is this fleet retired, for which you should select yes. Fleets should only be deleted if they were added to the form in error, or if you are removing a duplicate after using the Add Existing Fleet function. The next form is the Service Vehicle Inventory A35 form, which reflects an inventory of service vehicles that support your agency's transit service. Agencies are required to report service vehicle fleets for which they have capital responsibility. Service vehicles include cars used for administrative staff, transit police cars, tow trucks, service trucks, and other support vehicles. Because service vehicles must be roadworthy in order to be reported, agencies should not report small forklifts, golf carts, or any type of construction equipment that is not roadworthy. This form works In a similar manner as the A15 form, to create a new fleet, select Add New. Please ensure that you report revenue vehicles on the A30 form and service vehicles in the A35 form. In other words, you should not report vehicles on the A35 form if the vehicles are used to transport passengers. If your agency does not have capital responsibility for any service vehicles, please select the No Data to Report checkbox. Report the service fleet information for this vehicle fleet. Select a vehicle type from a drop-down menu, which consists 3 options: automobiles, truck and other rubber-tired vehicles, and steel-wheel vehicles. Automobiles are passenger cars up to and including station wagons in size. If you have a service vehicle that is a minivan or anything larger, report them as trucks and other rubber-tired vehicles. Estimated cost is the most recent estimate of the full cost to replace the fleet. If you do not have a recent estimate, you may report the original cost of the fleet or its insured value. You must also report the year that corresponds to the dollar value you report. Save and validate the A35 form once you are finished. The next form we will discuss is the Transit Asset Management Performance Measure Targets, A90 form. The A90 form is where an agency or an agency's group plan sponsor reports the portion of assets that will have met or exceeded the useful life benchmark of the asset. This will show your target reported last year, the current performance that is pulled from the current year asset forms, and a place for you to report your target for next year. For the vehicles on the A30 and the A35, the performance measure is determined by the useful life benchmark. For facilities on the A15, the performance measure is determined by the condition assessment. Some agencies report their targets directly to the NTD, and some are participants under a group plan sponsor who reports one A90 form on behalf of all of their participants. The first section of the A90 form is rolling stock, which refers to the revenue vehicles you report on the A30 form. You should report performance targets for active revenue vehicles for which you have capital responsibility. And you should select NA for any vehicle types that do not apply to your service. The second section is equipment, which refers to the service vehicles you report on the A35 form. This section reflects the 3 vehicle types represented in the A35 form, which are automobiles, trucks and other rubber-tired vehicles, and steel-wheeled vehicles. You should complete this section in the same way that you complete the rolling stock section. The third section, facilities, contains your agency's targets for the facilities you reported in your A15 form. You should report the percentage of facilities that you expect will rate below a 3 on the term scale as of the next fiscal year. At the bottom of the form, you should upload your narrative report document, which is an annual requirement. Your narrative report should outline the targets your agency set in this A90 form, the progress towards those targets, and any changes within your transit system's operating environment. The narrative report document should be uploaded and submitted with your annual report. Next is the reduced reporting RR20 form, which contains the highest volume of data in the NTD report. When you open the RR20 form, the section Total Funds Expended appears at the top of the form. This is a non-editable running total of all of your agency's various funding sources like fares, federal grant programs, and local funds. We will go over the various funding sources categories momentarily. The sum of your funding sources should match the value you enter for total funds expended by mode and type of service, which is a number that you manually enter as shown by the boxes here. As a reminder, financial data should reflect funds that were expended during the fiscal year, not earned. Agencies that operate more than one mode are required to capture and report actual expenses by mode and type of service. and should not allocate their total operating expenses. If your agency operates more than one mode, you should first determine which expenses are direct and can be easily traced to a specific mode, which may include driver wages or vehicle repairs. For the remaining joint expenses which are incurred for the benefit of more than one mode and cannot be traced, you can allocate those remaining costs. An example of this may be a transit manager salary that supports both demand response and fixed route services. You may allocate those shared costs using an allocation factor such as vehicle revenue miles, unlinked passenger trips, vehicle revenue hours, or number of employees. The next section of the RR20 is the fare revenues. This section also begins the different funding source categories. Fare revenues include all income received and expended directly from passengers, including donations made on board the vehicle. Fare revenues are broken down between passenger-paid fares and organization-paid fares. Passenger-paid fares are those that are traditionally considered as passenger fares, in which a passenger pays to board the vehicle. This category includes the fares listed here, including adult fares, senior citizen fares, and student fares. Organization-paid fares are those that an organization pays for or pays through a third party on behalf of the passenger. One common example is a university that pays a transit agency to allow students to ride fare-free. Please note that Medicaid funds should not be reported, or should be reported as organization-paid fares. If your agency operates more than one mode, you're required to capture and report the fares by mode and type of service. There are certain exceptions to this requirement as listed here. If your agency's fare policy falls under one of these exceptions, please notify your analyst during validation. But in most cases, you should report actual fare revenues by mode. The next section is other directly generated funds. This is where you should report advertising revenue, donations, insurance recoveries, and other non-fare directly generated funds. If you report funds to this field, a text description box will appear. Please ensure that you provide a description of these funds. The next section is revenues accrued through a purchase transportation or PT agreement. You should report funds to this section if you receive revenues from another agency that pays for the full cost of a service that you provide, as long as it meets the NTD definition of purchase transportation. This is a rare selection for agencies, so please discuss this with your analysts if you believe you should report new funds to this field. If you report new funds, your analyst will ask for more information regarding the purchase transportation agreement. The next funding source category is non-federal funds. Enter the data based on what funds your agency expended from local funds, state funds, and other non-federal sources. Local sources include tax levies, general funds, and finances from local entities. State sources include state programs that support public transit. If you report other funds, you must provide a text description of these funds. In the next section, federal funds, select all applicable federal funding sources from the list of programs. Once you select a box, the corresponding data entry fields will populate to the right. Please note that various 5311 COVID-19 relief programs are separate line items. Please report any such programs such as CARES Act or American Rescue Plan in their respective data entry fields. If you report funds to any other category, such as other federal funds or other FTA funds, you will be required to provide a text description to describe that funding program. Examples of other FTA funds include those not listed already, such as Section 5308 FTA Clean Fuels Program. Examples of other federal funds may include Housing and Urban Development or HUD funds, or any other non-FTA federal source. Other U.S. DOT funds will include funds from the Department of Transportation that are not FTA funds, such as the Federal Highway Administration. As mentioned a moment ago, the CARES Act, the CARISA Act, and the American Rescue Plan Acts are listed separately in the federal funding section. Please note that there are 2 data entry fields for each of these programs, one for 5311 Rural Area Program Funds and one for 5311 Public Transportation on Indian Reservations Program Funds. Please ensure that you report your agency's expenses to the correct field. The next section in the form is annual service data. When reporting miles and hours, you should only include those miles and hours in which your transit vehicles are operating in revenue service, which is when the vehicles are transporting passengers or have the capacity to transport passengers. Unlinked passenger trips should reflect each time a passenger boards a vehicle and should include personal care attendants who ride fare free. Please note that while you report sponsored service, unlinked passenger trips are for certain modes in a separate data entry field. The total unlinked passenger trips should represent all ridership for the year, including regular and sponsored trips. In other words, you should not deduct sponsored unlinked passenger trips from your total unlinked passenger trips. If your agency reports a tribal subsidy agreement, meaning your agency subsidizes a local provider's service and does not directly operate or purchase any other service, you will see a reduced version of the RR20 form. You will not report service statistics from this service because the data will be captured in the provider's NTD report. You should only report the funds your agency contributed to the provider for this service. Next, we will discuss the new Safety and Security SNS 60 form. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL, requires the NTD to collect data related to assaults on transit workers. The statutory definition of assault on a transit worker is a circumstance in which an individual knowingly, without lawful authority or permission, and with intent to endanger the safety of any individual, or with the reckless disregard for the safety of human life, interferes with, disables, or incapacitates a transit worker while the transit worker is performing their duties. The requirement applies to reduced and rural reporters who already reported a summary of safety data to the NTD in previous years. The requirement also applies to asset-only reporters who will begin reporting safety data in report year 2023. Assaults can be classified into 2 categories, physical and non-physical. Physical assaults involve physical contact with a transit worker or can include any contact with the attacker's body, a weapon, a projectile, or another item. Physical assaults can include the assailant's saliva as well. Non-physical assaults do not involve any physical contact and can include threats, intimidation, or interfering with the worker's duties. Reportable events occur on transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility or maintenance facility, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle and meets a reporting threshold. For a safety event to be reportable, it must meet a reporting threshold which includes the following: a fatality confirmed within 30 days of the event, an injury requiring immediate medical attention away from the scene for one or more persons, property damage equal to or exceeding $25,000, collisions involving transit revenue vehicles that require towing away from the scene for a transit vehicle or other non-transit vehicle, or in an evacuation of a transit facility or vehicle for life safety reasons. You should exclude events that occur at bus stops or bus shelters that are not on transit-owned property, unless it involves boarding, alighting, or involving a transit vehicle. You should also exclude events that occur off transit property where the affected persons come to rest on transit property after the event. Here's an overview of the pre-BIL and post-BIL reporting requirements and how safety data reporting will change starting in report year 2023. The key data elements now include assault on transit workers, The reporting population has been expanded to include asset-only reporters. The reporting scope has not changed, as the agency types listed above will continue to report safety data only on an annual basis. The collection time frame is also consistent with previous years, as the SNS 60 data is included in the annual report package, which is due 4 months following your tribe's fiscal year end. One key update to safety reporting is that agencies must report additional details regarding bus collision fatalities. Agencies previously reported these types of events, but only reported a count of injuries or a count of fatalities as general safety incidents. They did not specify whether the injury or fatality resulted from an impact with a bus. The SNS 60 form will provide fields for additional event types, including collisions with pedestrians, collisions with vehicles, or collisions with an other category, which can include an animal or a manhole. There's also a field for other major events, which are safety events that meet one of the reporting thresholds mentioned earlier, but are not specifically one of the collision types listed above. So fires are one example of another major event type. If there is a fire on transit property that results in an injury or property damage exceeding $25,000, you will report that here. Finally, there is a field where you will report injuries from non-major events. We encourage you to contact your analyst if you have any questions or require additional clarification. Here's a screenshot of the SNS 60 form that depicts the physical assaults and non-physical assault sections. The columns represent the various location types where assaults may happen. The options are physical assaults in a transit vehicle, physical assaults in a revenue facility, physical assaults in non-revenue facility, and physical assaults in other location. The rows represent the total event counts for major safety and security events and non-major events. For all injuries and fatalities, you must report them based on person type, including operators, other transit workers, and other. The same rows and columns appear in the non-physical assaults tab. Here's a screenshot of the bottom portion of the SNS 60 form, which includes all other reportable safety and security data. The columns may look familiar to you if you completed an NTD report in the past. Previously, we only collected a summary of event counts, fatality counts, and injury counts, but now you can report them based on event types as listed on the left. Again, the types include collisions with pedestrians, collisions with vehicles, collisions with other, and other major events, which again are non-collision events that meet a reporting threshold. The last row represents total reportable injuries which stem from non-major events. The next form in the report package is the Federal Funding Allocation Statistics, or the FFA-10 form. The FFA-10 form allows agencies to allocate their vehicle revenue miles between multiple rural areas and or urbanized areas as needed. The majority of the tribes who report to the NTD operate in only one state. So in these cases, you should allocate 100% of your data to that area. If your agency operates in 2 states, you will need to report the service performed in each. Reporting data by area is critical as it impacts the amount of funding FDA apportions to each area. This is the layout of the FFA-10 form. The form automatically pulls data you reported in the service data section in the RR20, as well as the value for operating expenses. The first step in completing this form is to select your UZA reporting method. If you only operate within one state, select annual actual vehicle revenue miles. If you operate within more than one state or area, you can select actual vehicle revenue miles, or you can select actual data. If you only report to one UZA or non-UZA, the total should always match the data from other forms column to the left, which is the data pulled from the RR20 form as shown by the line. If you report data to multiple areas, the allocated percentage should always total 100%. If you save data to the RR20 form, then complete the FFA-10 form later, but later revise the RR20 form again, you will need to update the FFA-10 form again based on the latest revision to the RR20 form. The last form we'll discuss is the CEO certification, or D10 form. The D10 form is divided into 2 sections. The first section is overall accuracy, where your agency CEO attests that all data captured in the NTD report is accurate, truthful, and up to date. Select the header for the unlinked passenger trip section to continue. The second section is the unlinked passenger trip data section. Select the method that your agency used to collect unlinked passenger trips from the drop-down menu and save and validate when completed. Finally, we will discuss the validation process and report submission. After you submit the report, your assigned validation analyst will review the entire report for accuracy and consistency. He or she will compare the data in this year's report to data submitted in last year's report to look for any significant changes, ensure that all forms have been completed, and to check to see that the data has been reported to the correct fields. If your analyst asks about any data changes from last year to this year, please avoid providing generalized responses such as the data is correct, as these types of responses do not offer an explanation for the data change. Please provide specific responses to validation issues. The more information or context you provide early in the reporting process can help reduce the number of report turnovers before closeout. Once your analyst has reviewed the report, he or she will return it through the system so that you may resolve the open validation issues. As the report revision count increases, the revision time period decreases, as the report should have fewer and fewer issues with each submission. If any data issues were noted in last year's closeout letter, be sure to address or correct those items in this year's report. If you fail to correct any issues stated in the prior year closeout, they may be marked as questionable in the current validation year. This is a summary page of a report package. This table lists the number of open issues as well as total issues. You will want to focus on the number of open issues, as open issues will prevent you from submitting the report. The table also shows which forms have been validated, which appear as green, and non-validated, which appears red. Each report form has a regular save button as well as a save and validate button. If you save and validate the form will appear as green on the summary table. However, if you make changes to the form afterwards, you must save and validate again. If you make changes to a form that has already been validated and hit the normal save button, the form will revert back to red and will not turn green until you save and validate again. There are two ways to view your validation issues. The first way is to open an individual report form, scroll to the bottom of the page, then click on View Issues to review them. The other way is to review your issues from the summary page. Select View Issues from the top right-hand corner of your report summary page. This will open a page that contains all validation issues in your report across all forms. After selecting View Issues, a new page will appear with the list of your open issues. If you click on the issue line item once, it will highlight in dark blue. After the issue highlights, scroll down the page to review the issue's language. After reviewing the language, you can either comment in the comment box with an explanation and save your response, or you may choose to click on View Related Form to make any updates needed. The best way to resolve validation issues is to provide thorough and detailed explanations that give your analyst a clear picture of your agency's transit service. Explain why the data changed from year to year, or what service changes took place to cause a significant increase or decrease in the data. If you find that last year's data was incorrect, please provide the correct value if you have it, or provide an explanation for why it was wrong and why this year's data is correct. Please note that FTA does not accept this response for multiple report years. Notes in the closeout letter will typically relate to incomplete reports, which could mean either the data does not conform with NTD definitions, accounting principles, or it could mean that the agency did not adequately respond to validation issues raised by the analyst. If you respond to a validation issue and notice that your analyst has kept the issue open with a follow-up question, please do not copy your original response and paste it as your follow-up response. Please also avoid copying and pasting the same response for multiple validation checks, if the checks are asking about different service characteristics. All identified issues must be fully addressed in order for the issue to be resolved. When any of these issues occur, FTA cites them in the closeout letter. Once you complete all the forms, you will need to submit the report within the NTD system. Please note that saving and validating the D10 form does not constitute submission of the report. To initiate the submission process, open the report package and select Related Actions. Please note that only the CEO or CEO delegate can submit the original submission or first draft of the NTD report, and then the NTD contact can submit all subsequent revisions. In the Related Action menu, select Submit Annual Report Package as seen here. If all the data is filled out and there are no issues preventing you from submitting, this page will appear, and you will click Continue. Following submission, you will be taken back to the Related Actions page. If you're unable to submit the report, this screen will appear. All issues must be closed out. All forms must be saved and validated with all required fields completed. If this occurs, please review the forms and issues. The process of review begins with data issues being explained or corrected. Then the NTD analyst reviews the report further. This will lead to either all issues being resolved, resulting in a clean closeout, or some issues that have remained open. These will be cited in the closeout letter. Your analyst will provide you with resources in their welcome email. Furthermore, they will be available for guidance throughout the whole process. Here is the contact information for our team, as well as the NTD Help Desk, which is open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we will now open up to any questions that were not answered during the presentation.
Hi, everyone. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A box, or at this point, you could probably put it in the chat and I will be able to see it. We'll wait a minute, and if there's no questions, I will wrap it up. Thank you for attending, Jessica. While we're waiting for any questions to come in, I will say that I will be sending out an email with a link to a survey, an evaluation of the session. If you could just take a couple minutes and fill it out, we would really appreciate it, as it informs our future sessions. And there's no questions coming in. You've been a quiet group this afternoon. Oh, Amy has a question. If there are incidents with no reported injuries, are they not reportable?
Sorry, was muted.
I was gonna say.
That's a really great question. So it will depend on what the incident is and if it goes under the other qualifiers, such as like the $25,000 worth of damage, tow away for the scene for life or safety reasons, information like that. So there could be an incident with no injuries and no fatalities. So just make sure that it is a slip and fall on site. I believe that should be reportable. If you could email your analyst a little bit more information, we can make sure what it falls into, if it does fall into anything. No problem.
Is that it? I see that Amanda, you have your hand raised. I don't know if you were just trying out the feature or if you actually have a question. Oh, okay, it's gone. All right, I guess that's it. Thank you, everyone. Special thank you to Bailey and Parker. We really appreciate it. And again, we have a course, so check it out. Oh wait, Amy has another question. it's related to biofuel vehicles. Is there a category for them?
Sorry, I was talking, of course. So it will include alternative fuels. Biodiesel is a fuel. Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry. If I can edit it and get it posted this afternoon, I will. Otherwise, I'm going to be out of the office until Friday. So I'll do my best this afternoon, but it might not be posted for about a week and a half or so. But it will be on our YouTube site. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna put the NTI YouTube in the link in the chat right now so everyone will have it. Let me just, I think I would know it off the top of my head, but I always have to paste it. And then you'll have it. And there's a whole bunch of stuff up there, lots of resources. Here it is. There's our YouTube. Got tons of previously held webinars on there. So bookmark it. And it's also on the front page of our website, NTI Online. If you lose that link, you scroll down, there's a link there to take you to our YouTube page. I guess that's it. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.